Hey, mythology lovers, welcome back to another video. In this video, I want to talk about magic and myth. There's a lot of magic in mythology, there's no doubt about that, but most of the time it's magic done by gods or fairies, and of course they're magical beings. They can make all kinds of marvels and miracles. They could point in a direction and make something appear out of nowhere. There's stories of gods creating people out of making little clay images of people and making them come alive. I'm talking more about magic done by us mortals, us non-magical beings, so to speak. And also through these stories, we learn a little bit about the principles of magic. What is it about these principles that people believed worked? And some people to this day still, there are some people who believe in magic to this day, and there are certain principles as to how they work, why they work. The first story I'm going to tell is a very ancient story from Babylon. It's thousands of years old. It's called The Worm and the Toothache. Basically, it's a little poem, and it takes place in primordial times, when the heavens were created, the earth was created, the sea, the waters, the earliest living things. During this time, this little worm came crying to one of the gods, the sun gods. And he was crying because he wanted something to eat. So the sun god said to him, well, I'll give you some figs. And he offered other things. And the worm was like, oh, what use do I have of those things? I want to suck the blood from the root of the tooth in the jawbone. So thanks to the persistence of this worm who wanted to suck on teeth, we have toothache. Now, what's interesting about this story is that there seems to be two parts to it. There's the first part, which I mentioned, getting his wish to suck on teeth. There's a second part that is more to do with a type of primitive dentistry. But the first part, for the purpose of this video, is the interesting part to us because this poem is an incantation, and it even says to repeat it 3 times because it's believed that it's an origin story, how the worm got to suck on teeth. And it's believed that there's a principle in magic where if you know the origin of something and you repeat it, it's believed you have power over that thing. You could manipulate it. You could make it work for you. So you have power over this worm. And hence it was seen as like a little spell, an incantation you would repeat, and as if to say, I know you, worm. I know how you got this ability. But just for the sake of elaboration, I do want to mention a little bit about the ancient dentistry part. It talks a little bit about some sort of ointment to put in the tooth. But what's really interesting also is that it even mentions how to put a needle in the tooth and grab the foot of the worm, which I find very interesting because it sounds a lot like root canal. I don't know anything about ancient Babylonian dentistry, but I wouldn't be surprised if they had a very primitive form of root canal. I spoke about this story with my dentist, and he said to me, he goes, well, if you look at the nerve of a tooth, it looks like a worm. And I thought that was interesting. So lo and behold, years went by, and just a few weeks ago, I needed a root canal on my canine. And I said to the dentist, because I'm kind of a freak, I said, I want to see the nerve when you pull it out. And he was like, okay. So I don't know how many, I'm sure there are those of you out there who have had root canal. It's not a lot of fun. He takes a drill, he makes a hole in your tooth, and using these files, he goes in and out and yanks out the nerve from the tooth. And he showed it to me, and there it was. It was about 1 inch long, and it was white and bloody, and it looked like a little worm, sure enough. And so it looks like a worm, and it kind of, I didn't say the incantation, but at the same time, in that incantation, it does seem to imply it's some sort of early form of root canal. Okay, so moving on, I want to talk a little about image magic, the idea of creating an image and using magic to make it come alive. There's a story from ancient Egypt where some people believe it's the origin of magic, Egypt. There's a lot of stories of magic. There was a priest, a very powerful priest, very prestigious priest, who was friends with a pharaoh. And what happened is that his wife was having an affair with a with somebody, and they would swim together in the lake. And the servant of the priest got very angry at this and told the priest, and the priest said, "Okay, we'll take care of this." So he went to this little box and he pulled out this little wax image of a crocodile. And he gave it to the servant and he said, "Throw this in the water the next time you see them together." And the servant said, "Okay." So sure enough, the time came where the lovers were in swimming together, and the servant threw this little image, wax image, in the lake, and it turned into this huge crocodile and swallowed the guy. So that night, or sometime after that, the priest invited the Pharaoh over for dinner, and he said to the Pharaoh, he said, I've been the victim of something of a great injustice, and I want you to arbitrate for me. And my wife has been cheating on me with this guy, and he calls up the crocodile, and the crocodile opens its jaws, and inside is the guy, the lover, who's still alive, and he says to the Pharaoh, "What justice do you demand of this?" And the Pharaoh said, "Well, let the crocodile have him. Let the crocodile keep what he already has." So sure enough, the crocodile went back in the water and swallowed and killed and swallowed the lover, and the Pharaoh then demanded that the wife die too. So that pretty grim story is kind of interesting. The next story also involves an image, but it's a little more precise as to how the magician made the image come alive. Maybe the Egyptian story tells a little more exactly, but I'm not aware of it. So what happens is that in the Middle Ages, in Prague and in other areas, there used to be these ghettos where the Jews used to live. And unfortunately, they had to deal with persecution from Christians. So what they did, according to legend, one of the things they did to protect themselves is they would create a golem. Now, this golem was a man of clay, big man of clay, and he would be made to come to life by the rabbi. Notice these magicians tend to be clerics, and that's not surprising because throughout history, the clerics are seen as these keepers of this great store of knowledge. And they deal with God and spirits and angels. It's not surprising. It's believed they're associated with magic. So what a rabbi would do is on a piece of parchment, it's believed that some rabbis were in possession of the true name of God, and which very few people know. He would write this on parchment. Whoever knew this had powers, and he would write this true name of God on a piece of parchment and stick it in the mouth of the golem, and he would make the golem come alive. And not only would the golem would keep the people in the ghetto safe, but he would also be made to do all kinds of labors. According to one story, one particular golem got a little too excited and went a little nuts, and he started knocking down buildings and destroying houses and setting things on fire. So the rabbi who was in charge of him got called in, and he successfully was able to yank out of the golem's mouth the parchment with the word of God, and the golem then just became a blob of clay, which is what he was made from. So this is an interesting story where the word of God was used to have magical powers. Now, it's interesting how God is sometimes used to give you powers. There are some that argue against this. Nobody should be made to have magical powers. Only God has. But sometimes there seem to be a few examples. Like, for example, in the Bible, we hear of Aaron and Moses going to the Pharaoh demanding to let his people go, and there's that story of Moses being able to turn his staff into a snake. Now, again, nobody's going to accuse Moses of magic because it's really God doing it. He's just working through Moses and Aaron. So there are some that believe that if you're able to do magical operations, you're really in league with demons. Because you shouldn't be, it's not believed people should be able to have magic. So it's believed that they're in league with demons. This is an old belief. And And because you're not really doing magic because of love of God. You're doing magic because you see yourself as a god. And a really good example of this comes from Christian legends. There's a story. It's actually there's a character in the Bible called Simon Magus. Simon Magus was a minor character in the New Testament in Acts. What happens is that he sees Peter performing miracles, but Peter is doing it. It's God doing it. Peter is just the vehicle, because of his great faith and love of God. But Simon Magus doesn't understand this. He thinks it's great magic that he could purchase. And Peter yells at him and tells him, "Get lost. This is not something you could buy. This is God's power." So that's simony is used to describe whenever you think you could purchase miraculous ability. It's usually referred to as simony. It comes from Simon Magus. But from this story, there are legends that grew up outside of the Bible, where Simon Magus is seen as this powerful magician who is in league with demons to do all kinds of miraculous things. And his nemesis is Peter. Peter does miracles like curing the sick and raising the dead because it's really God working through him. But Simon Magus does these things because he's in league with demons. So the two of them have a magical contest. Magical contests look really cool. And the two of them are in front of the Emperor of Rome. And they both do magical operations. And Simon says, "Look at me. I'm like a god. I'm going to rise to heaven myself." And he rises to heaven. And Peter prays. And suddenly Simon Magus falls to the ground and dies. And what happened was Peter was able to tell that Simon was being lifted up to heaven with the help of demons. Demons were really swarming around Simon Magus and lifting him bodily up into the heavens to make him look like he's flying, because Simon Magus really doesn't have powers. It's really the demons he's employing. And so through the prayers of Peter, the demons fled, and Simon Magus fell to his death. Or according to another version, he was only wounded badly, and the people stoned him to death. So that's an interesting operation of magic using the employment of demons. So that's some interesting stories on magic. The story of let's see, the story of the Golem I got from this book. I'll write the stories and the books down in the description below. Spells and Bindings by Time Life Books. The story of the worm and the toothache is from this great little book called The Babylonian Genesis by Alexander Heidel. The story of the crocodile coming to life is in this fun little book, Gods and Pharaohs from Egyptian Mythology by Harris and O'Connor. And I don't remember where the version of the Simon Magus story I happen to have in my head. I'm not exactly sure which book I used, but because I have several books that mention him. But this book talks about Simon Magus, in addition to all kinds of wonderful Christian myths, and it's called simply Christian Legends, and it's by George Every, and so I have these books in the descriptions. Okay, so until next time.